panagdait sa tanan ug sa tanang kabuhatan. So, our topic is the helping problem solving process in social work. Social work, like all others helping professions, observes a systematic process of working with people. This process consists of 5 basic steps which will be discussed in this chapter: assessment, planning, intervention or plan implementation, evaluation, and termination. So, the origin of problem-solving process. So, according to Dewey, the problem-solving behavior is based on reflective thought that begins with the feeling of doubt and confusion. So, Dewey has 5 phases of reflective thinking. The first is recognizing the difficulty. Second, defining or specifying the difficulty. Third, raising a suggestion for possible solution and rationally exploring the suggestion, which includes data collection. Fourth is selecting an optimal solution from among many proposals. And fifth is carrying out the solution. So, George Follia, 1940, a mathematics professor, developed a model which he intended to be used as a guide by anyone engaged in problem solving. So, George Follia's model consisted of the following phases. First is understanding the problem, including the problem situation, the goal of the problem solver, and the conditions for solving the problem. Second is devising a plan by which the goal could be attained. Third, carrying out the plan. And fourth is evaluation of the plan, its implementation, and the results.
Problem-solving framework in social work. According to Helen Harris Perlman, considered as the originator of the problem-solving framework in social work, which has greatly influenced social work thinking. It is in her book, A Social Casework. It is a problem-solving process. She described the social work process as a progressive transaction between the professional helper and the client. We will all know that there is the author who followed a framework of problem solving. According to Florence Hollins, casework process defining the general nature of the problem presented. This is the first casework process. The second is psychological study. Third, diagnosis and formulation of treatment plans. The fourth is treatment. The last is the evaluation. And Robert D. Venter, in her group work process, the first is intake, diagnosis and treatment planning, group composition and formation. The third, group development and treatment, the evaluation, and lastly is termination. A community organization process, recognition of problem, analysis of the problem or assessment, planning, consideration of the action to be taken. Action is the execution of the plans, inheritation of service or project. Last is evaluation.
So, the following sequential steps of problem-solving process are: first is recognition or defining of the problem and engagement with the client system. So, pag kilala sa problema at pagkikipag-ugnayan sa sistema ng kliyente, marag makikonek ka sa imong kliyente para masabtan nimo iyang problema. So, second is data collection. Third is assessment of the situation. Fourth, goal setting and the planning of an action. Fifth, intervention or carrying out the action. Then evaluation and termination. So, a scientific method is a method that involves the recognition and systematic formulation of a problem, the collection of data through observation and experiment, and the formulation and testing of a hypothesis or tentative explanation of the problem. So, the problem solving is essentially a cognitive process, a rational procedures involving a series of steps to be followed sequentially. And the social work helping process is the context in which we use the problem solving process. It's not just cognitive process since it involves a relationships between two parties, the worker and the client system. So, the steps in social work helping problem is the social work helping process consists of the following sequential steps which are followed when working with any type of client system, individual, family, small group, and community. So, the first is assessment, planning, intervention or plan implementation, evaluation, and termination. The helping relationship. The worker-client relationship is such a crucial factor. It can spell the difference between successful or unsuccessful problem. Relationship is the basic concept in social work. So, dapat jud nindot inyong relasyon sa imong client, like para makasinabtanay mo kung unsag gyud and makuha nimo unsag gyud iyang problem, then makabalo ka unsa imong matabang sa iyaha, then maka-suggestion nimo nga unsa ang itabang pod nimo sa iyaha sa client. So, Immanuel Trapp had developed an important set of statements which, while relating primarily to the social worker presentation of self to the group. So, these are the na-develop ni Immanuel Trapp na mga important set of statements. So, there are 16 set statement. First is compassion. So, kanang I deeply care about you. So, dapat kana social work ga-care jud sa client. Then, mutuality. We are here on a common human level. Let's agree on a plan and then let's walk the path together. So, kanamara, dapat makisinabtanay yun sila sa client. Then, humility. Please help me to understand. That respect. I consider you as having worth. I treat your ideas and feelings with consideration. I do not intrude upon your person. Fifth is openness. I offer myself to you as you see me. Real, genuine, and authentic. Dapat maging open jud mo sa kamo, the client and the worker. So, 6 is empathy. I am trying to feel what you feeling. So, ang murag ang social work like mo adjust para sa client. Then 7 is involvement. I'm trying to share and help in your efforts. Ni siya ang sa client pagtingali ni. So, ang support is I will lend my conviction and back up your progress. 9, expectation. I have confidence that you can achieve your goals. Limitation. I must remind you of your agreed obligation. Confrontation. I must ask you to look at yourself. Planning. I will always bring proposals, but I would rather have yours. So, dili gyud ang social worker magpataka og like magbuot kung unsa ang imong itabang sa kliyente. So, dapat mangutana gyud ka sa kliyente nimo kung unsa imong angay matabang sa imong kliyente. So, 13, enabling. I am here to help you become more able and more powerful. Spontaneity and control. I will be as open as possible, yet I must recognize that on your behalf, I need to exercise some self-control. So, 15, rule and person. I am both a human being like you and social representative of an agency, which a special function to perform. The 16 is science and art. I hope to bring you a professional skill which must be based on organized knowledge, but I am dealing with people, and my humanity must lend art to grace science. Now, let's start the assessment. So, A. Max Siporin defines assessment as a process and product of understanding on which action based. So, assessment statement appears in most social work literature and seems to also be the preferred term in the field of practice today. The information or the data gathering. The primary source. The client is primary source of information. Syempre, whether the client is an individual or a community, what he is and how he feels and behaves is your main concern. So, the problem of client are one of the main concerns. So, dapat may bawaan sa dyan na to. First, ang problem sa client. Like, mo assista. Secondary sources is the significant others in the life of the client are an important source. In the case of individuals, this means those with whom he has personal relationships like parents, siblings, relatives, and friends. Third is existing data. A social worker may use information previously collected by others, such as records and reports from other professionals and social workers of other agencies, studies, and evaluations. So, fourth is workers' own observations. The worker often has the opportunity to observe the individual client alone or in interaction with others. The use of observation can be extremely helpful to community social worker. So first sa gyud kay mo, observe sa gyud ka sa mga community or sa imong client. Then so the following are suggested principles in data gathering. The first suggestion is the client should be the main source of information, although when appropriate and available, other sources should be used. Syempre, sa client should assist nimo siya, like dapat may baon sa nimo first iyang problema. Then second is data to be gathered should directly relate to the identified problems. Then, third, the client should be informed about the source being used for data collection. In certain cases, his permission should be sought before certain kinds of information are obtained. Then, fourth, data collection is a continuous process, but it is the collection, organization, and synthesis of such data that is especially critical to the definition of the problem and the setting goals. So fifth, the type of client and the general nature of the problem can guide the worker on the type of data that should be collected and how much. Thus, there would be differences in data collection. In the case of mentally disturbed adult being placed in a hospital, a child being referred for adoption, and a youth applying for membership in a human resource development group. The kuan kanang moto siya ang mga suggested principles in data gathering. So the initial contacts with client and team. The initial contact between the client and the worker may come about in different ways. First is the client initiates the contact. Second, the client is referred to the worker or agency by some interest or concerned party, a relative, neighbor, teacher, and etc. So the third is the agency through the social worker reaches out the client and offers help. So murag like third, the agency through the social worker reaches out the potential client. Like ipakita na sa social worker ang murag potential sa client niya, maaring ma-offer siya sa mga ubang agency, like example iyang skill kay kaya niya ana maghimo og mga kana basta maayos siya sa iyang skills, like i-refer siya sa agency nga kani pwede ka ingani nga trabaho like sa factory, example na. So para to. So the next is writing an assessment statement. First is opening casual statement. This requires the workers clearly indicate who has the problem and why the problem exists at this time. Opening casual statement. So, isa ka social worker, imurag indicate niya ang iyang client, then ang problema, and ang problema nganong kuan man nagka-problema siya man ay nganong na kuanan man niya nga problema sa iyang client, nganong kuanan man to sa basta mo to. Then second is change the potential statement. A problem's change potential is dependent on three interdependent factors. First, A is the problem. The worker and the contact system consider the nature of the problem and its change potential by answering the following question. Can this problem be resolved? Is the nature of the problem irreversible? How long has the problem been going on? Who is involved? And to what extent? So, kani ang problema sa kliyente. So, can this problem be resolved? Yes, if kanang like naamoy tarong conversation sa inyong client, then ang imong client maingon niya tanan ang iyang mga problema sa imuha, then like you are there to assist your client para matabangan nimo siya. So the worker needs to assist the strengths and weaknesses of the person having the problem. Then C, environment. In considering the environment in which the problem is located, the worker should know the following. What formal or informal resources are available in the environment can promote necessary changes? What restraining forces are there that are stronger than supportive resources? Which optimum use of available resources? What is the expected outcome? So if maingon na sa imong kliyente ang iyang problema, then you go to the environment, like may resources sa available sa environment that can promote the necessary changes para makuan niya na out niya na ng problema niya. So third is judgment about the seriousness of urgency of the problem. Based on available data, the problem worker should be able to answer this question. To what extent and this a life or death matter for the person concerned. Life endangering situation require the social worker immediate attention. Even in a judgment, the change potential for the problem is very low. So, ang importante gid sa like sa social worker is dili gid ka mag judge sa imong client sa iyang mga problem. um, you should kanang assist good siya sa iyang mga problem instead of judging her or your client. The characteristics of assessment. So first is it is ongoing. Although it is the primary focus of the early stages, it takes place throughout the helping relationships. Yeah, it is ongoing. Like sa pagpangitan nimo sa pagpangitan nimo problema sa imong client, like how you para open up sa siya imuha, dapat jud may in relationship. Then second is it focuses on understanding the client in the situation and providing a base for planning and action. Third is it is a mutual process involving both the client and the worker. Fourth, there is a movement within the assessment process. So Louis Johnson states that these movements come from observation of parts deserve the situation to the identification of information needed for understanding, to collection of facts about parts of the service situation, the explanation of the meaning of the facts collected, to putting together facts and their meanings about various parts in order to understand the total situation. So, ito ang giingon ni Louis Johnson. State is, movement comes from observation, observe, service situation, then identify ang information needed for understanding, to collect facts about parts and service situation, then explaining the meaning of the facts collected, then putting together facts, their meanings about various parts in order to understand total situation. So, fifth is both horizontal and vertical explorations are important. A horizontal study of the client situation is a study in brief to identify all possible parts, interactions, and relationships. This facilitates understanding of the nature of the problem. Those parts identified as most important to the situation or the solution of the problem are later explored in depth vertically. Next is assessment identifies needs and life situation, defines problem and explain their meanings and patterns. 7. Assessment is individualized. No two assessment statements are exactly the same since every assessment is related to the unique situation of every client. 8. Judgment is important in assessment because many decisions have to be made. 9. No assessment is ever complete. It is not only possible to have a complete understanding of any situation, but many clients' needs are urgent and require that the worker must decide when her understanding an adequate enough basis for action, even as efforts to understand the client and the situation continue. So, that's all the moral process para sa assessment. So, the planning will be presented by Miss Morhia.
Nagdaig sa tanan, so planning. Planning is the link between assessment and intervention. Although it is often considered part of the assessment process, it is so important in the helping process that it should be discussed separately. Planning is a link between assessment and intervention because it gathers an idea on dealing the client's problem and reach its goals for the better change of the client. Planning helps us to be accountable for what we do. In the planning stage, the social worker begins working with the client, and much like the assessing stage begins developing a plan with the client. And in order to accomplish goals that work to resolve the targeted issues, and also in this stage, the social worker must only assist and guide the client, and the client must have to come up with a plan in order for him to give the best plan of his or her problem. The social work can't give plan to the problem of the client because the client must participate and cooperate. Even though the social worker may not have every information they need to make a holistic assessment of the client's situation during the interview, still this should not hinder the worker's effort in identifying goals for it to achieve. As what I've said before, planning allows the worker with the client's participation to move from problem definition to problem solution, and through the guide by the social work values and a body of knowledge. So, we have two major tasks that are involved during the planning stage, and these are formulating goals that directly relate to the client's need or problem and defining the specific actions or interventions that are necessary in order to achieve the goals. In social work practice, the defined goals and plans guide the worker's activities. Therefore, it is important that the two terms are understood clearly. Goals are ends. They are the desired or expected outcomes of an endeavor. So, we have three terms that we can also use in social work practice, and these are the interim goals, intermediate goals, and objectives. They refer to specific, short-term goals which facilitate the achievement of the long-term or overall goals. Goals give direction to the worker's relationships with her clients. Thus, to be useful, goals should have the following characteristics: specific, concrete, and measurable in the physical. First, specific, concrete, and measurable. These goals that are stated in too broad or general terms are difficult to measure. These are the goals that are difficult to know if the social worker have been accomplished the goals. Second, we have feasible. Goals should be realistic and attainable.
This is a continuation of the planning step in helping process. First, the plans. If there are ends or goals, there should be means to achieve them. This would consist of the specific actions or steps to be undertaken in order to reach the goals, jointly made by the worker and the client. They comprise what is called a helping plan, action plan, or intervention plan. In the planning step, there should be a participatory approach between the client and the worker to have a good planning for the situation. Units of attention. An intervention or action or helping plan calls for an identification of other persons who, in addition to the client, have to be given attention because they are involved in the situations, and work with them is essential to goal attainment. These are called units of attention, meaning systems that are the focus of the change activity. It means that we have to give attention to those people who can help to attain our goals. Strategy. The first two components of plan in the context of social practice are the goals and action plans, and the unit of attention are followed by what is called strategy. The strategy is defined as an overall approach to change a situation. It is a term that originated from the military and refers to the battle plan. It implies orchestrated action that involves different entities, each having a role to play in order to achieve the defined goals. Strategy is very important to have a good planning. If you have a good plan, if sa planning pa lang na naka-strategy, then the implementation will be successful too. In social work, we now find a variety of approaches to practice. called theories of practice or models of practice. These conceptualizations are crisis intervention approach, mediating model, locally development, provide an overall approach to practice and therefore may be considered as strategies. Factors that influence the interventive plan. First, the community in which it is being carried out. The environment in which the plan takes place is an important consideration in planning. The culture of the place, attitudes about the receiving help, prevailing values like cooperation and self-help, and the existing service delivery system are among the factors that influence an action plan. The second one is that agency sanction the plan. The worker is influenced by both constraints like agency function and kinds of service available, funding considerations, time and attention that can be provided, and resources like staff, structure, money, and supplies. So one of the factor that influence the interventive plan is that available bank service if ever na implement a plan, then enough bank funding if ever na i-implement ang plano, and so on. The third one is the social problem that the plan is a response to. Societal attitudes and expectations about social problem vary, and the social worker should recognize this because it influences her plan of action. Thus, there are problems that are perceived as personal pathology and deviance, and there are problems that are developed and supports extended to agencies on the attitudes about the social problems being addressed by these programs and services. Number 4, the social worker involves in the plan. The worker is a unique person who brings into the helping situation many facets of herself, a professional, an employee, or a member of the community. Each of these exert an influence on the worker, sometimes favorable, such as adherence to ethical conduct or her commitment to place client interests above other considerations, sometimes unfavorable, such as sense of loyalty to one's agency, which makes the worker accept its rigid policies. The plan of action also reflects the worker's preferences, priorities, and skills, like the worker's choice of practice models. And the last factor that influences the interventive plan is the client. The client is a unique biopsychosocial being who has his own motivation, capacities, coping abilities, expectations, limitations, as well as preferences. This, plus the many roles he has in his current living, as well as the response to the worker-client relationship, can affect the plan of action. If dili mo cooperate ang client during planning, maka-influence jud siya during sa interventive plan. The helping contract. After having worked together in assessment and action planning, what should follow is an argument between the worker and the client on what needs to be done and who should do it. This is called a contract in our setting, and having verbal agreements is a more common practice. So there should be a contract that states that the client should participate during the helping process. Another step in social process is the implementation or the intervention. The social work literature has many other terms for intervention: action, plan, implementation, or treatment. Whichever term used and which term is used will depend on the practitioner's orientation. Like a clinical social worker will usually use treatment instead of the other term. This phase in the helping process is concerned with the action that would solve the client's problems. Intervention involves the rendering of all the specific and interrelated services appropriate to the given problem situation in the light of the assessment and planning. It includes all the goal-related activities that the work will undertake following the agreement forged with the client based on the problem to be worked on and the plan of action to be pursued. So there is implementation, during i-implement ang mga services nga nahimo during sa planning. Compion and Galaway has very APT words for two of the phases of the helping process. Number 1, deciding what to do and doing the decided. The first one involves the assessment and planning steps, and the second one is intervention. It is during intervention that the worker is faced with the challenge of putting into operation her professional knowledge, values, and skills to help the client reach their mutually defined goals. So there is intervention diri na i-apply sa worker ang iyahang professional knowledge, values, and skills to reach their goals. Interventive rules in direct practice. The social worker's problem-solving efforts will require a variety of interventive rules which refer to the composite of activities to undertake in order to accomplish the goals agreed upon with the client. One of the interventive rules in direct practice is the resource provider. This rule engages the worker in the direct provision of material aid and other concrete resources that will be useful in eliminating or reducing situational deficiencies. An example of this is giving money or financial assistance to the clients or goods for his/her everyday needs. Furthermore, resource provision is not limited to money or goods, but other concrete services that are necessary in order to achieve the helping goals for the client. Another interventive role is the social broker. It involves the process of negotiating the service jungle for clients, whether singly or in groups. The worker links or connects the client to needed services in the community. This rule requires a broad knowledge of community resources as well as knowledge of the operating procedures of agencies so that effective connections can be made. The social broker will help the client find the community resources that match her needs and assist the client to make use of these resources. Another one is the mediator. A mediator is a person who acts as an intermediary or conciliator between two persons or sides. In her work with individuals, families, groups, and communities, the worker often has to involve in efforts that will resolve disputes between the client system and other parties. A mediator will help the client and the other parties to reconcile, to resolve conflict between the client and his or her family, groups, or in the community. Advocate. The term advocacy comes from the legal profession. Like the lawyer, the worker has to take a partisan interest in the client and his cause. The advocate will argue, debate, bargain, negotiate, and manipulate the environment on behalf of the client. The advocate will serve as the voice of the client to influence the client's interests. Another party, usually possessing same power or authority over the client. The next one is the enabler. The enabler rule involves the social worker in interventive activities that will help the client find the coping strengths and resources within themselves to solve problems they are experiencing. So the enabler performs supporting and empowering function so as to enable the client accomplishments of a defined change. The enabler role can be used to effect change within the client or in the client's pattern of relating to others or the environment. It is also useful in helping the client change his or her own reality or environment if this is the source of the problem. Next is the counselor or therapist. The goal of the worker who performs as a counselor therapist is the restoration, maintenance, or enhancement of the client's capacity to adapt or adjust to his current reality. Kani mga counselor, sila ang maganda kong counseling. Example, kanang na yung mga victims sa mga sexual harassment. Dayon, this includes also listening, reassurance, persuasion, direct advice, guidance, suggestion to the client. Interventive rules beyond direct practice. This presentation will not be complete without mentioning the fact that social workers also engage in interventive activities that do not require direct or face-to-face relationship with the clients. The following are 3 such interventive rules that are especially useful in our setting. Number 1, mobilizer or community elite. The intervention involves the worker in activities aimed at informing and interpreting to certain sectors of the community, welfare programs and services, as well as needs and problems with the objectives of enlisting their support and or involvement in them. Elite is comprised of individuals and groups who are usually in a position to provide, in one way or another, the resources the worker needs in her work with the client. Elite people are those people na makaprovide siya sa resources nga need sa worker para matabangan ang mga clients. Number 2, documentator or social critic. In this interventive role, they document the need for more adequate social welfare policies and programs based on her knowledge gained from actual experience about the inadequacies or deficiencies in these existing welfare policies and programs, as well as on her belief as to how they ought to be in the light of professional values and goals. So, kining documentator or social critic, kaya documents nila ang mga sufficient social welfare policies and programs nga iyang nahibalan during her experience and the inadequacies or mga deficiencies sa mga existing welfare policies and programs and so on. And the last one is the policy or program change advocate. The term advocate was used earlier but in another context. In direct practice with the client system where the worker takes a partisan interest in the client and his cause. The same time is being used here, but this time in a different sense. The worker is involved in efforts to change policies and programs on behalf of the particular sectors of the population based on the values of the profession. So, diri ang advocate kay involved siya para ma-change ang policies and programs on behalf of the particular sectors. Every worker can be an individual advocate by means of writing or kanang magsulat or maghimo mga verbal pronouncements in public forums to gain more supporters to support the policies and programs being recommended. There are limitations on workers' activity during the helping process. The best laid plans are not always accomplished. There are limitations on the worker's activity that should be understood because they affect the worker's performance of interventive roles. First one is the time. The worker may not be able to give the client unlimited time, so that the worker should not make any processes which she is not sure she can fulfill. Number 2 is the skill. The worker should perform only those activities that are within her competence. So, dapat buhaton sa worker ang activities na makaya lang sa iyang kaugalingon. Number 3 is the ethics. The worker should watch out for activities that might commit her to unethical behavior. For example, if naay madawat nga financial assistant ang client, basin mangayo pa siya og commission nga, and that's very unethical. And the last one is the agency function. The worker must be sure that she understands and interprets agency function properly. This is very important na makabalo ang worker sa function sa mga agency para ma-implement og tarong ang mga plans.
So, what is evaluation? Evaluation is defined as the collection of data about outcomes of a program of action relative to goals and objectives set in advance of the implementation of the program. In social work, evaluation is a continual process where the works keeps on gathering data which she uses in an ongoing definition of the problem. This is ongoing evaluation. Besides doing continuous evaluation, she also has to undertake terminal evaluation, which refers to the evaluation undertaken before ending a helping relationship. So, another very important reason for doing evaluation is because social workers and social work agencies must answer for their work not just to the clients who are the direct users, but to the public that supports them. This is what professional accountability means, the demand for which has become more pronounced because of scarce resources in our country. There are two aspects of an evaluation model. An honest-to-goodness evaluation in social work should utilize scientific method to measure outcomes. Therefore, as in any good research, the evaluation is directed towards the following: the measuring the outcomes of programs or specific interventions. Second, measuring the change process or the nature of the intervention themselves. 3. Utilizing a research design that will permit you to attribute the outcome to try to change the processes. Evaluation that is concerned with outcomes or effectiveness is called summative evaluation. While evaluation that is concerned with looking at the process of the work called formative evaluation. So there are 4 elements of program: structure and logic. First, inputs are the resources necessary to implement the program or the intervention. Second, activities are the things that agencies do to produce change services. 3. Outputs are the immediate result of the program or intervention plan. 4. Outcomes are the longer-term benefits from the program or intervention plan.
I'll be discussing you the last part of helping processing in social work, and these are the termination. So in termination, there's a question here that when is a helping relationship terminated? So the helping relationship terminated if the clients are now being independent and responsible of their problems without the help of social worker, and also when such services and relationships are no longer required or no longer serve the client's needs and interests. A social work problem-solving relationship does not go on forever. So, dili jud mag-last ang pagtabang sa social worker sa isa ka client. And it has a limits so that whether one is working with an individual, a group, or a community, the social worker should discuss with the client the more or less expected duration of the help relationship. The following are the most common reasons for terminating the client-worker relationship. So we have 6. 1. When the goals set by worker and the client have been reached. 2nd, when after a reasonable period of time, there has been very little movement toward attainment of the goals formulated and the prospect for any change in the situation is held unlikely. When the client thinks that the worker has provided sufficient help so that it is now possible for the client to pursue problem solving on his own. When an agency does not have the resources needed by the client or the worker does not get her agency's approval to provide the services needed by the client. When the system outside the client make it difficult for the client to continue with the helping relationship, or when the systems influence the client to discontinue the relationship. And lastly, we have when for one reason or another the workers must leave the agency. 2 terms were used in relation to the termination of the helping relationship, the transfer and referral. So these are the 2 terms that we can use in relation to the termination. We have the transfer and referral. Transfer is the process by which a client is referred by his social worker to another worker, usually in the same agency, because the former will no longer be able to continue working with the client, or because she thinks another worker is in a better position to work with her client's problem, while the referral is the act of directing a client to another worker or agency because the service that the client needs is beyond the present agency worker's competence, or the client needs the additional service which the present agency cannot provide. So we have the components of termination. Ellen Pincus and Ann Minhan present 3 major components of the termination process, and these are the engagement, disengagement, stabilization of change, and evaluation. So in this disengagement on the client's part, the following are among the most common reactions that have been identified. Denial is a defined mechanism that is employed to avoid painful feelings. Emotional reactions, fear of loss or fear of the unknown can give rise to feelings of sadness or of grief. Bargaining, some clients try to negotiate an extension of time or a modified schedule which can mean fewer contacts over a longer period with the worker. Depression, little energy, withdrawal, sadness, and others are the absence of motivation to go on and are the manifestation. The client's pain is real and evident. Acceptance. The client manifests an increase in energy and is able to talk about the good and bad times and to think about the future. And client reacts differently to termination. The following are some of the factors which influence their reactions. We have the length of services, attainment of client goals, client-worker relationship, modality of intervention, and stabilization of change. So in termination evaluation is the ongoing part of the helping process, hence the word periodic or regular evaluation. Periodic evaluation allows the worker and the client to review and, is necessary, revise the goals and objectives, assess under failures and negotiate conflicts. Terminal evaluation should involve client participation. And that's all for today. Have a wonderful day.